Lastly, for our news this week, uh, a surprise to be sure, but I think a welcome one, and that is that we're getting another new Blair Witch movie. Now, whether this is a continuation or a reboot, I'm not entirely sure, but Josh and I have a bit of a complicated history when it comes to the Blair
hmm
Witch as a franchise. The first one I saw was the reboot, the 2016 version, just called Blair Witch. Um, by and large, I think it's just a slightly below average, just kind of okay found footage movie until you get to the last 20 minutes, in which case you were absolutely crapping yourself the entire time. That is genuinely one of the few times that a horror finale nails it. I think a lot of times horror movies, the first 2/3 are scary, and then they kind of like overdo the scares and trying to make this big epic finale that the last third of a horror movie ends up not being as scary as the
Yeah,
rest of the movie,
it's
because
not
that's
scary.
where your conclusion is. You have to wrap stuff up and actually have to focus on the story. But no, the Blair Witch is the exact opposite. It's the most terrifying at the end. Then I went back and watched the original one from 1999, which definitely I think does scare me, but not for the reasons that you would think. Like, it's supposed to be
hmm
like paranoia and whatnot of like the Blair Witch is out there somewhere. That doesn't scare me at all. It's these characters slowly losing their minds and not knowing where they are, and the sense of dread and feeling utterly and hopelessly lost in the middle of nowhere. That I felt that tension and stress. That was actually scary. And then an often overlooked aspect was the Blair Witch video game that supposedly was
Mm,
pretty good. I have not
yes,
played
it's
that,
very
but I've heard both good and bad things about it. So I think there's a lot of potential here, whether it's a continuation of the 2016 one, or heaven forbid it's a reboot of Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows. You know,
good.
that movie that only diehard horror fans and people that watch film, quote unquote, criticism on YouTube are familiar with. Uh, as a person that's more casual to Blair Witch, are you excited for more, or are you just kind of whatever here, Josh?
I think I like the idea of Blair Witch. I really do. I love there is like a kind of a niche love I do have for found footage. I think if done correctly can be very compelling and pretty terrifying, honestly. Um the 2016 Blair Witch was my first interaction with that as well, and I also enjoy. I felt like it built okay, and then that last 20-30 minutes is absolutely terrifying, and some still to this day some of the scariest stuff I've seen in film, um without actually also seeing much either, which is really really interesting as well. Um as far as is if this is a sequel or a remake or whatever, I'm fine with it. Do like Blair Witch, I think it is a very interesting character, and I feel like there's got to be like some better ways to tell that story and to make the build better. Because I mean, I don't think. I think the question I'd ask you is: do you want to have this still as a found footage? Do you try to change it a bit and do it as a more quote unquote traditional horror movie, or like do you just give it to a really really competent director and go the found footage route?
So found footage is tricky because the biggest issue with found footage, I think, is explaining why it's found footage,
Yes.
and very few movies actually do it successfully. Like, I think The Visit surprisingly does it well. Of, hey, I'm a film student, I want to film everything. Okay. Same thing with Blair Witch. Actually, now I think about it, the original probably did it first. Um, what I would do with this, and I really do want another one. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm getting some ideas for it. Kind of follow the template that you did for the game. You don't really need a
Mm,
big cast for this. Just have like one, maybe three people, just like the original. Better yet, make it only one person, and sporadic other characters occasionally show up and you don't know if they're real or not. Um, but there's a fan film that I will always go back to of more movies should be like this. It's a Friday the 13th fan film called Never Hike Alone. Basically, it's a quasi found footage slash somewhat actually shot like dude that is supposed to be an outdoor backpacking and outdoorsy type of vlogger, and he accidentally stumbles upon Camp Crystal Lake, and he has to like basically survive Jason. And honestly, it's the best Friday the 13th movie that they've ever made. It's so good. I would kind of do the exact same thing, except put Blair Witch in it. Of like maybe one person or a group of people are just like, we're gonna go backpacking, a la The Ritual. Maybe they're going out to
Mm.
escape, or like the Evil Dead remake. We're going up to the woods to cleanse the system of like detox type of thing, and then
Yeah.
do it like the Evil Dead of, because you're in withdrawal, is this real? Am I losing my mind, or is it actually the witch? I think there's some interesting stories to tell here. I would keep it found footage just because found footage, the way we're able to shoot stuff has drastically improved over the
Yeah.
years with like
Agreed.
handheld cameras and GoPros and whatnot. And also, people I think have gotten better at how to do found footage. There's that great one last year called Deadstream. It's a horror comedy,
Mm.
but that still was incredibly effective with its scares and its humor. I think we've only gotten better with how to shoot stuff for found footage, and I think there's still enough gas in the tank here, and there's enough brand recognition to tell more Blair Witch stories. So I would take it back to the original roots of only have a
Mhm.
couple of characters, never fully show the witch. Don't make this an origin of the Blair Witch type of story. Um, no, just call it the Blair Witch. Just the Blair Witch? No. I know the other one was called what? Blair Witch Project or just Blair Witch? Just call this one the Blair Witch and have the balls to make it a prequel like the Vavitch. But
I
it's found
yeah.
footage. It's not found footage, but it's like POV type, but set in like the 1920s or 30s, sometime earlier.
Ooh. Maybe like the first time that she kills
No
or something
technology
like that.
whatsoever.
Yeah, no technology and all that. That could be really, really interesting. And like I like that found footage is capable of being really, really good. As above, so below is one of the best, one of my favorite horror movies. Does found footage really, really well. I can see it. I'm okay with it still being modern. I do think going the direction that the game does would be very, very, very smart. Having it this guy who's going through a lot. He is helping people search for this girl who's lost in the woods, and then he gets caught by the witch and gets, his brain starts changing and stuff like that. So like I think there's a lot of interesting ways to go to fold the story in. I don't think you need to go all the way to do a prequel. I don't think you need to do I definitely think you don't need to do a remake.